This IKEA unit has followed me through about 5 different house moves and 25 different decorating phases. So today we're going to keep with tradition and we're going to upcycle it once again. I keep changing it up instead of replacing it, partly because A, it's cheaper, B, it's better for the environment, and C, I kind of like the idea of it sort of evolving with me as I move. So that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah, that's what I thought this video was going to be about, but in reality, I made a truly impressive number of errors while I was upcycling this unit before I eventually pulled myself together at the end. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to watch this video together. I'm going to pause it along the way, and I'm going to point out exactly what I did wrong so that you can maybe avoid making the same mistakes I did.
So we're starting with lightly sanding the damaged areas using 120 to 180 grit sandpaper.
Yep, do that. That was a good idea.
Then afterwards, I'm giving it a quick wipe with a damp cloth to remove any dust.
I got a bit distracted by welding halfway through this process, and if you've been around my channel any length of time, you'll know that getting distracted is pretty much my brand at this point. Just jumping in very quickly to say you probably should be wearing a mask while you're doing this. I'm not, because this is a really well ventilated space and it's a very windy, blustery day, so I'm happy enough. But yeah, you probably don't want to be inhaling MDF dust and paint fumes. So now that's dried off a little bit, I'm going to be filling in some of the screw holes with polyfiller. Wood filler would probably be better, but I've got polyfiller. Everyone loves polyfiller, so that's what we're going to be using. So that is meant to be surface dry in 1 to 2 hours, but it then says in brackets, depending on conditions, and it is freezing today. So I wouldn't be surprised if it took a little bit longer. We're going to come out in about an hour's time and see where we're at.
And where we were at was nowhere good because nothing had set because it was too cold and 99.99999% humidity because I live in Ireland. So yeah.
So it was so cold yesterday, it took hours for these to dry, and by the time they were dry, it was basically bedtime. So we're on day 2, and today we're going to sand now down the excess polyfiller.
So I'm using, I don't know how to pronounce this, but Zinsser bin. It's a shellac-based primer. It's meant to seal kind of that fuzzy MDF board, help the paint grip the laminate and stop any stains bleeding through. I've never used it before, so this was a bit of an experiment. And I'm starting off by spot priming those damaged areas and then letting that dry for 45 minutes.
Then I applied a coat over the whole unit using these little rollers. I think they might be 4-inch rollers. And I also poured the primer out into a little tray after covering it with cling film first, just to save me on the cleanup later. And for my next trick, I forget that rectangles have 4 sides. So I was feeling very smug about myself coming out here in the dark after work in the middle of a storm, as you can probably tell, to finish priming the bottom of this IKEA unit, only to realize that I forgot that I'd previously drilled in little legs into what was the bottom of this unit. And so I'm going to have to basically do all the steps that you just watched again, just to polyfill it, spot prime it, and then do another full coat of primer all over the top. So away we go. So it's actually not the worst in the world in terms of timing, because I can still do these bits that were sort of on the tops, if you know what I mean, easier now that I've flipped it over. So I can still do a little bit. So here's a lowdown on the primer situation. Compared to when I've done this before without any primer, I would say using the primer improves things maybe about 70%. We still have like a little bit of slippage on those particularly like smooth parts of the vinyl. Again, though, bear in mind, it was really, really, really cold and very humid when I was doing this, so it might be different in your climate and location. But overall, for me, it probably would have saved a lot of time to just use furniture paint. So now we can start to talk about the exciting part, which is paint. So I have a cupboard here full of paints that I have used in previous projects. And I'm just going to take a quick look to see if there's anything in here that I could maybe reuse or even just like mix to like a custom color, so I don't have to go and buy another tin of paint when there's quite a few. So let's take a look. So I do have a white if I need to lighten anything, and I also have a black. So that's pretty good. We've got these little ones. I don't think one of those little ones is going to be enough. I'm looking for like an olivey kind of color, like an olive green, as opposed to olive pink. So this is the most promising. This is the green that I have on my wall right now. So maybe
I could take the green that I already have on my wall, because there is quite a bit in this, and mix it with some black. Maybe I'm insane, but I think that could work. Maybe I'll do a tester. Let's do a tester. So another thing that I do when I'm doing DIY or upcycling things is I sieve a lot of plastic bottles and then just cut the bottoms off them, because they're always really useful for doing things like this, like mixing paints, or I use them to start little seedlings in the springs. Okay, so I've mixed up those colors. This one in the middle is what I have on my wall right now. And then this is the exact same color, but I just added a bit of black to it. And then this one is another kind of like olivey green tester that I had left over. This is way, way, way too greeny, like grass green than what I was thinking about. I like this. I'm not totally sure that it's like olivey enough, but I think considering that I have all these paints sitting in my house, this is pretty close. Next lesson, the color that paint is on paper does not always match the color that it turns out on furniture. So this is how it looks now that I've mixed it up in the big pot. And these are the swatches that we did the other day when we were comparing paints. And then this is the one that I've just made up now. So I think these are pretty close enough anyways. So normally I like a thin coat of paint and a build-up process, but I think that literally any kind of friction on this surface just causes the paint to like skid and form a big line. So I think that if I was going to use like non-furniture paint on this, I would want to go heavier on the paint thickness rather than thinner. And another thing, rollers. I think that the rollers I got were too small for the top, and I also forgot that I needed to cut in the sides when I was doing like the little square inserts because the rollers obviously aren't going to fit in the corners. Sian.
So it's hard to see it under this light, but this is what we've got so far. It's not the most even paint job I've ever done in my life, but I'm hoping that things will dry down better, and things always look better with the second coat anyways. And it was at this point that my anxiety started to rise and my confidence with this project started to drop. By the time I was putting on that second layer of paint, my dopamine just nosedived because I knew in my soul that the color wasn't right. It was too light and it was starting to come up streaky in patches as it dried. So things were looking grim at this point. However, I am incredibly stubborn, so I came up with plan B. And plan B was, let's move this whole unit inside because I was worried that it was too cold and too damp outside for things to be working properly. So I moved things inside. I went to B&Q. I bought a tin of specific furniture paint, and I also bought some wallpaper as well because I decided that painting the inside of these little squares was driving me slowly insane. So I would paper them instead. I made more mistakes here, but overall, this was a much better approach. And this is what the paint looks like. It's Valspar in the color Wood Pigeon. It's like one of the ones you have to go up and get like custom mixed at the desk. But this is much more what I had in mind than that original very light green color. So to get this paint on, I did a light sanding job all over the unit and used a giant roller because I was very impatient at this point and whacked it on. I'd also picked up this little angled round brush to do some of the small details with, which I would have liked to have shown you if my giant ass head had not have gotten in the way. There you go, there's a little bit now. So that's what one layer of paint looked like. Before you put on the second layer of this paint, you do have to lightly sand it. So I did that, and then I popped on another layer of paint, which I didn't film because at this point I was definitely losing the will to live. However, it turned out absolutely fantastic. The color was perfect. There was no stains or scuffs that came through. I loved it. So I moved it straight into its position where it was going to be in my house, which is my bedroom. And I started to put in the wallpaper in the little squares. So now let's talk about wallpaper. I love the pattern. It matched the paint perfectly. So that was the good sides. There's this phrase I've heard used a lot when it comes to this sort of thing, which is measure twice, cut once. And I think that I could have probably measured 75 times and got 75 different measures and cut wrong 75 times. Not my strength. This is why I'm not terribly good at dressmaking, but I gave it a go. And then the last, but probably not the least of my errors was I bought this whole thing of wallpaper paste because I thought that's what I would need for wallpaper. I could probably got away with Mod Podge, to be honest with you, or some sort of other like PVA glue, to be honest, as I now have a giant thing of wallpaper paste that I'm probably not going to use at any time soon. But maybe I will, who knows? But yeah, I think if you had something else like Mod Podge in your house, you could probably get away with that. If you made it to the end of this video, congratulations. Here is your bonus pig picture, this time of the lovely Noel. If you liked the video, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. It would help this tiny channel grow. You can also find me a lot on TikTok and sometimes on Instagram. But until next week, take care. Bye.